If you're taking IB English B at higher level, your internal assessment is not a written assignment. It is your individual oral, and it is worth 25% of your final English B grade. So if you are aiming for a 7, this is an assessment you cannot afford to treat as just another classroom conversation. The good news is that the IA is highly structured, the criteria are clear, and once you understand exactly what the examiner is rewarding, you can prepare for it very strategically. For the HL individual oral, you receive 20 minutes of supervised preparation. You are shown 2 literary extracts, one from each of the 2 literary works you studied during the course. Each extract can be up to approximately 300 words. You choose one, prepare your ideas, and then enter the oral with brief working notes. The complete oral lasts approximately 12 to 15 minutes. The oral itself has 3 parts. First, you give a presentation on the literary extract for approximately 3 to 4 minutes. Then your teacher asks follow-up questions about the extract and the ideas you presented for approximately 4 to 5 minutes. Finally, you move into a more general discussion based on one or more of the 5 English B themes: identities, experiences, human ingenuity, social organization, and sharing the planet. That final discussion normally lasts around 5 to 6 minutes. One of the biggest mistakes students make is thinking that Part 1 should sound like an English A literary analysis. It should not. IB English B does not expect sophisticated literary criticism here. The extract is being used as a stimulus for you to explore its characters, events, ideas, themes, and messages, while demonstrating your ability to communicate effectively in English. Your presentation, therefore, needs a very clear focus. Begin by briefly identifying what is happening in the extract and placing it in the context of the work if necessary. But keep that contextualization short. Do not spend a minute retelling everything that happened before the extract. The majority of your presentation needs to remain firmly focused on the extract in front of you. Then move into 2 or 3 strong ideas. You might discuss what the extract reveals about a character, an important conflict, a relationship, a social issue, a key theme, or a message communicated through what happens. Refer specifically to details in the extract and explain why they matter. Your goal is not simply to tell the examiner what happens. Your goal is to show what you understand about what happens. A useful mental pattern is observation, evidence, explanation, significance. Make an observation about the extract. Point to the words, action, or situation that supports it. Explain what this tells us. Then extend the idea by explaining why it matters. That final step is what often separates a developed response from simple description. Avoid turning the presentation into a plot summary. If most of your 3 or 4 minutes could have been delivered without seeing the actual extract, something has gone wrong. Keep coming back to the passage itself. Your entire oral is marked out of 30. Criterion A, language, is worth 12 marks. Criterion B, 1, message in the literary presentation, is worth 6. Criterion B2, message in the conversation, is worth another 6. And Criterion C, interactive skills and communication, is worth 6. Criterion A is the largest criterion, so language matters enormously. The examiner considers the range and appropriateness of your vocabulary, the variety of grammatical structures you use, your accuracy, and your pronunciation and intonation. Notice that this does not mean using the most complicated English you possibly can. Students sometimes memorize impressive vocabulary and force it into every answer. That can make their speaking unnatural and even reduce accuracy. Strong English B speaking sounds controlled, flexible, and natural. Instead of memorizing dozens of exotic words, build useful vocabulary around the literary works and the 5 themes. Learn language for expressing opinions, interpreting behavior, discussing consequences, making comparisons, introducing examples, considering alternative perspectives, and qualifying arguments. For example, instead of repeatedly saying, I think, develop alternatives such as, this seems to suggest that one possible interpretation is, from my perspective, what is particularly significant here is Mosher's, or this could be seen as. Do the same with grammar. You want enough grammatical variety to demonstrate control. Use conditionals when discussing possibilities, relative clauses when adding detail, modal verbs when expressing degrees of certainty, and complex sentences when developing relationships between ideas. But never sacrifice clarity merely to sound sophisticated. Pronunciation matters too, but you do not need to imitate a British or American accent. What matters is that your pronunciation and intonation allow your ideas to be understood easily. Practice difficult words from your literary works and from the 5 themes before the oral. Record yourself. Listen for rushed endings, unclear consonants, unnatural pauses, and completely flat intonation. Fluency also improves dramatically when you learn to think in chunks rather than memorized sentences. Practice expressions such as, another important aspect is. This connects to the broader issue of. A good example of this would be, and, on the other hand, these give your brain time to organize the next idea, while keeping your speech flowing naturally. Criterion. B1 is worth 6 marks and applies specifically to your presentation on the literary extract. This is where relevance and development become crucial. Your ideas should remain focused on the extract and should be supported and developed rather than simply mentioned. Imagine you say, the character is isolated. That is only an observation. Now develop it. What exactly in the extract creates this impression? What does the character say or do? How do other people react? Why is that isolation important? Does it connect to a larger conflict or theme in the work? That development is where marks are earned. You can refer to the wider literary work when it genuinely helps explain the extract. You might explain that this moment represents a turning point, contrasts with the character's earlier behavior, or develops an important theme seen elsewhere. But remember the basic rule. The extract remains the center of the presentation. Your preparation for B1 should therefore begin long before the day of the oral. Do not merely reread the 2 literary works and hope you remember them. Build a preparation bank for each work. Know the principal characters, major relationships, turning points, conflicts, themes, important social or cultural issues, and central messages. Then practice with random extracts. Give yourself 20 minutes, create brief notes, and deliver a 3 to 4 minute presentation. The more extracts you practice, the less dependent you become on receiving a particular easy passage. And do not memorize a complete presentation in advance. You do not know which extract you will receive, and memorized material can quickly become irrelevant. Prepare flexible knowledge and flexible language instead. Criterion B2 is also worth 6 marks, but this time the focus is the conversation in parts 2 and 3. The examiner is looking at how appropriately and thoroughly you answer questions and how much depth you bring to your responses. This means that one-sentence answers are dangerous. If your teacher asks, "Do you think the character made the right decision?" and you answer, "No, because it was selfish," you have technically answered the question, but you have given the examiner very little to reward. Develop it. No, I don't think the character made the right decision because it seems to be motivated mainly by self-interest. Although we can understand the pressure he is experiencing, his decision also affects the people around him. In that sense, the extract raises the wider question of whether personal freedom can justify harming others. Now you have an opinion, explanation, qualification, and extension. A simple strategy for conversational answers is answer, explain, exemplify, extend. Give your direct answer. Explain why. Add an example where appropriate. Then extend the idea towards a consequence. Comparison. alternative perspective, or wider issue. This becomes especially important in Part 3 because the conversation moves beyond the literary extract and into the 5 prescribed themes. Your teacher may ask questions about technology, education, culture, relationships, migration, the environment, social structures, identity, scientific development, or many other issues connected with those themes. Do not attempt to memorize answers to hundreds of possible questions. Instead, prepare examples. For every major topic you study, have 2 or 3 examples you can actually discuss. These could come from your own experience, your community, another culture, a historical development, something you have studied, or a relevant real-world situation. Examples give your answers substance. Also practice looking at issues from more than one perspective. If the question is about whether artificial intelligence improves education, do not automatically produce a simple yes or no. You can argue that it improves access to personalized support while also raising concerns about dependence, academic honesty, and inequality of access. That ability to qualify an argument gives your response much greater depth. Criterion C, worth the final 6 marks, assesses interaction and communication. This is not simply another language criterion. The examiner wants to see whether you understand the conversation, respond appropriately, and sustain the interaction. Treat the oral as a genuine conversation, not an interrogation. Listen carefully to the complete question. Respond to what was actually asked, rather than launching into whatever prepared answer happens to be closest to the topic. Build on questions. Add something of your own. If appropriate, connect the teacher's question with an earlier idea. Say, that actually connects to what I mentioned earlier about, or there is another side to this issue that is worth considering. Those independent contributions help you sustain the interaction rather than merely waiting for the next question. If you do not understand a question, do not panic. Asking for clarification once is far better than confidently answering the wrong question. You can naturally say, "Do you mean specifically in relation to the character?" Or, "Could you clarify what you mean by..." But if nearly every question has to be repeated or rephrased, that will obviously affect the quality of the interaction. You should also avoid trying to take over the interview by constantly asking your teacher questions. Criterion C is about sustaining communication, not becoming the examiner. IB specifically clarifies that engaging the interlocutor does not mean students need to lead the conversation by questioning the teacher. Your preparation notes also need to be used intelligently. IB permits brief working notes, approximately 10 short points, but these are supposed to support you rather than become a script that you read aloud. Write prompts, not sentences. Instead of writing, the author demonstrates that the protagonist feels alienated because he has been rejected by society. Write something like alienation, rejection. Society consequence. That small prompt can trigger 20 or 30 seconds of natural speaking without trapping you inside memorized wording. And this leads to perhaps the most important preparation strategy. Practice under realistic conditions. Choose an unfamiliar extract from one of your works. Give yourself 20 minutes. Prepare brief notes. Record a 3 to 4 minute presentation. Then have a teacher, classmate, or even a list of unseen questions force you to continue speaking without knowing exactly what is coming next. When you listen to the recording, assess yourself according to the actual criteria. For Criterion A, ask, is my vocabulary varied? Am I repeating basic expressions? Do I use different grammatical structures? Are my mistakes interfering with communication? Is my pronunciation clear? For B1, ask, am I genuinely discussing the extract, or am I retelling the novel? Did I develop my ideas? Did I support them with specific details? For B2, ask, are my answers detailed enough? Do I explain and extend my ideas, or do I stop after one sentence? For C, ask, do I sound as if I am having a real conversation? Am I listening and responding? Do I contribute ideas independently? Do not measure your practice simply by asking, did that sound good? Measure it against the criteria. And remember that linguistic perfection is not the standard. What you need is effective communication, appropriate range, developed ideas, and sustained interaction. So if you want to ace the English BHLIA, think about the 30 marks strategically. For the